Everyone believed him. That was the most dangerous part. When investigators first looked at the husband, they saw exactly what they expected to see. A grieving man, calm but broken, cooperative, and seemingly honest. He spoke softly, answered questions patiently, and never once appeared defensive. Friends described him as loving. Neighbors said he was quiet and respectful. Even experienced officers felt no immediate reason to doubt his story. If deception had a perfect disguise, this man wore it effortlessly. The case began with a disappearance that seemed simple at first. His wife vanished without warning. No struggle was reported. No signs of forced entry. Her belongings were still inside the house. According to the husband, she had simply left after an argument to cool off. He insisted this wasn't unusual. Couples fight. People need space. His explanation sounded reasonable, too reasonable. In the early days, attention focused on possibilities outside the home. Investigators explored whether she had run away, met someone secretly, or become a victim of an unknown crime. The husband encouraged these theories without pushing too hard. He let others suggest them. It was subtle, but effective. By not forcing a narrative, he appeared honest. What made him especially convincing was his behavior. He reported her missing at the right time, not too early, not too late. He participated in searches. He spoke to the media, showing concern without appearing desperate. He never contradicted himself, at least not in obvious ways. Every detail he shared fit neatly into a believable story. To most people, he looked like a man trapped in a nightmare he didn't understand. But cases like this are rarely solved by first impressions. Behind the scenes, investigators quietly began comparing timelines. They analyzed phone records, financial activity, and surveillance footage from nearby locations. At first, nothing stood out. The husband's phone activity appeared normal. His spending habits hadn't changed dramatically. He continued going to work. He lived his life as if he were waiting for his wife to come home. That normalcy raised a quiet concern. Experienced agents know that genuine grief is unpredictable. People break down at unexpected moments. They contradict themselves. They make mistakes. This man didn't. He was composed at all times. Too composed. Even when discussing emotional memories, his tone remained controlled, almost rehearsed. It wasn't enough to accuse him, but it was enough to keep watching. As days turned into weeks, cracks began to form. One investigator noticed a small inconsistency in his account of the night his wife disappeared. It was minor, almost meaningless on its own. A time that didn't quite match phone data, a detail about a conversation that didn't line up with message logs. When asked about it again, the husband corrected himself smoothly, without hesitation. Most people would stumble. He didn't. That correction became a turning point. Authorities expanded their investigation, bringing in more advanced analysis. Movement data from his phone revealed patterns he hadn't mentioned. He had traveled to a location that had no clear explanation, an area far from his normal routine. When questioned, he provided a reason immediately. It sounded logical. But again, it sounded prepared. The deeper they looked, the more his intelligence became apparent. He understood how investigations worked. He knew what details mattered and which ones could be ignored. He avoided emotional traps. He never volunteered information that could lead back to him. It became clear that if he was lying, he wasn't improvising. He was executing a plan. And that's when federal authorities became involved. The case had crossed a line from local mystery to something far more complex. Analysts began reconstructing events minute by minute. Digital footprints were examined in detail. Deleted data was recovered. Small actions almost invisible to the average person started to paint a different picture. The husband hadn't just reacted to events. He had anticipated them. One discovery changed everything. A piece of evidence surfaced that contradicted the foundation of his story. It wasn't dramatic. No blood, no witness, just data. But data doesn't lie. It showed that his movements after his wife's disappearance didn't align with someone searching for answers. They aligned with someone checking outcomes. When confronted with this information, he remained calm. He didn't argue. He didn't panic. Instead, he adjusted his narrative slightly, offering a new explanation that fit the evidence. To anyone else, it might have worked. But by now investigators were no longer listening to his words. They were measuring his reactions. And his reactions were wrong. There was no fear of being misunderstood. No frustration of being doubted. Only control. It was as if he believed he could talk his way out of anything. That confidence, once reassuring, now felt dangerous. As pressure increased, so did the scrutiny. Old conversations were re-examined. Past arguments resurfaced. A pattern emerged. Subtle signs of resentment, control, and a need to maintain a certain image. The marriage, once described as stable, began to look strained behind closed doors. And suddenly the idea that his wife had simply walked away felt less believable. Still, there was no body, no crime scene, no direct proof, and that was exactly what he was counting on. As the investigation deepened, the image of a grieving husband began to crack. Small inconsistencies appeared first, the kind that might seem harmless on their own. A timeline that didn't quite add up. Phone records that showed activity when there shouldn't have been any. Financial decisions that felt oddly rushed for someone supposedly overwhelmed by loss. To most people, these details meant nothing. To experienced investigators, they meant everything. Authorities quietly began reviewing his past. What they found was a pattern of carefully crafted lies. Not loud lies, not reckless ones. These were subtle distortions of truth, adjusted depending on who was listening. To friends, he was the devoted partner. To colleagues, the hard-working professional. To law enforcement, the cooperative widower, eager to help in any way possible. He knew exactly what people expected to see, and he gave it to them. What made the case even more complex was how convincing he was. Interviews showed no visible panic, no emotional cracks. He spoke calmly, often expressing concern for the investigation itself. He asked smart questions. He remembered details when it suited him, and forgot them when it didn't. This wasn't someone acting under pressure. This was someone performing a role he had practiced for years. As federal authorities became involved, the stakes changed. Analysts began reconstructing events, minute by minute. Digital footprints were examined closely. Emails, search histories, financial transfers, and location data slowly revealed a second life, one hidden beneath the image of a loyal husband. What emerged was a story of manipulation, long-term planning, and a complete lack of emotional attachment to the person he claimed to love most. One of the most chilling discoveries came from his own words. Private messages showed a version of him that the public never saw. Cold, calculated, focused on outcomes rather than consequences. Investigators noted how he spoke about people not as humans but as obstacles or tools. This psychological detachment explained how he was able to deceive not just friends and family but trained professionals as well. Still, confronting him required precision. Authorities knew that one wrong move could cause him to retreat behind his mask. So they waited. They let him talk. They allowed him to repeat his story again and again, knowing that repetition is where liars make mistakes. And eventually he did. During a later interview, he contradicted an earlier statement without realizing it. It was subtle, but it opened the door. Investigators pressed gently, not aggressively. His confidence began to slip. Not enough for most people to notice, but enough for those watching closely. The performance was starting to strain. When the evidence was finally presented to him, his reaction wasn't anger or sadness. It was calculation. He paused. He asked for clarification. He tried to redirect the conversation. This response confirmed what experts already suspected. His concern was never about truth or justice, only control. When control faded, so did the illusion. The arrest shocked everyone who had defended him. Friends who had spoken publicly about his character went silent. Family members struggled to reconcile the person they knew with the reality now exposed. Media coverage exploded, focusing not just on the crime, but on the deception itself. How could someone fool so many people for so long? Psychologists later explained that individuals like him don't rely on force. They rely on trust. They study emotions, learn how to mirror them, and use empathy as a disguise. Their greatest weapon is normalcy. By appearing ordinary, they avoid suspicion. By appearing cooperative, they disarm authority. In court, the truth unfolded piece by piece. Evidence showed planning rather than panic, motive rather than accident. The defense attempted to preserve the image he had built, but it collapsed under the weight of facts. Every lie that once protected him now worked against him, creating a clear picture of intentional deception. The verdict was decisive. The man who had fooled friends, neighbors, investigators, and even federal authorities was finally exposed for who he really was. Not a grieving husband, not a victim of circumstance, but a person who believed he was smarter than everyone else, and almost was. For many watching the case, the most disturbing realization wasn't the crime itself. It was how easy it had been to believe him, how confidence, calmness, and charm had overridden doubt. The case became a lesson taught in investigative training. Truth does not always look emotional, and lies do not always look suspicious. Today, this story stands as a warning. Not every monster looks dangerous. Some smile, some cry on command. Some stand beside you, convincing the world they are exactly who they pretend to be. And sometimes even the most experienced minds can be fooled, at least for a while. Because the most dangerous lies are not the ones told loudly, but the ones told perfectly.